Welcome to the Leadership Confidence Podcast. I'm Jennifer Cowley, and after 15 years in the public service, I have learnt that there is no set and forget rules for leadership. You don't need specific tools in your toolbox, and you definitely don't need to have all of the answers. I am here to tell you to stop trying to perfect the unperfectible and instead learn to lead in your own unique way. Before we get into today's episode, please subscribe, follow, or leave a review to help this message reach more people who need to hear it. Hello, welcome back to another episode 8 of the Leadership Confidence Podcast. I am so glad that you're here with me today. Today we are wrapping up step 1 in the Leadership Confidence Framework, which means next week in episode 9, we'll get to start stepping into some of the more exciting stuff around finding your value and identifying what are the things that help you build your confidence. Just to recap, I'm going to go over the Leadership Confidence Framework just to kind of let you know what those 3 steps are. If you haven't listened to the previous episodes where we've been delving into this, please do go back and have another listen, because it will really start to help identify some of those areas that you may be struggling with, imposter syndrome, that negative self-talk, and help you start to work through some of those. So that is step 1, breaking barriers of this framework. And we talked about in episode 6, and I will link all of this in the show notes. Episode 6, we talked about the imposter syndrome reset. So that was going through the 3 R's: reflect, reframe, react, to be able to move ourselves beyond that imposter syndrome and step into what we need to get done and be able to get out of our own way. Last week in episode 7, we delved into the negative self-talk, which is a little bit more personal, a little bit more ingrained in our subconscious from when we were younger, and the relationships and conversations that we had with people. And we talked through the different layers of our mind, and I likened that to the cave of negative thought, and how we can bring ourselves back out of the depths of that cave and into the light. This week, we're going to talk about the last part in this breaking barrier step, which is recognizing fear. So imposter syndrome, negative self-talk, all of these things are really our brain's way of telling us that we're afraid of what is coming. We're afraid of taking that next step. So we're going to delve into that today. Next week, we will move into step 2, which is building value, which is where we start looking at finding your genius and identifying the value that you bring that's unique to you. And then those confidence amplifiers that help build you up in those times of difficulty when, we've just having a rough time, somebody's given us a little bit of negative feedback, or we just happen to get out of the wrong side of bed that day. And then we'll continue on into step 3, which is be seen. So once we've done all of that hard groundwork to work through our imposter syndrome, we now know what our genius is. This is our opportunity to then lead, be present, and bring other people on that journey, be mentors to people, and help them find their genius along the way. So last week, episode 7, we talked about the negative self-talk cave. And there's a reason that we are scared of the dark at the back of that cave, or the dark in general. It's where the dangers lurk. It is an ingrained biological fear that most people have. But this is exactly where the negative self-talk and imposter syndrome comes from. It's fear. So here's a bit of a reality check. Imposter syndrome, it's not a character flaw. It's not a lack of capability. It's not actually identifying anything about the way that you do your job. It is that biological safety mechanism. Now, I am in no way a brain expert or psychologist, but I'm going to give you some basics of the brain, and particularly the amygdala, which is where fear comes from. So your primitive brain, which is this amygdala, it's called the amygdala. It's a small almond-shaped portion of your brain that sits within the temporal lobe. And it cannot tell the difference between being chased by a predator and stepping up to present to an executive board. They both trigger the same threat response. The paralyzing thoughts, the imposter syndrome, everything that comes up when you are nervous or scared to step into this, to present in this meeting, it's simply your brain's very, very clumsy way of attempting to keep you small, keep you quiet, and keep you safe. Because if we are not exposing ourselves, if we're not stepping into the light, then we are more likely to be safe. So, according to WebMD, the amygdala is the part of the brain that's most closely associated with fear, emotions, and motivation. It's linked to parts of our brain that control thoughts, and it's connected to that more primitive fight or flight stress response. And as I said, it's the same fight or flight response to we come across a tiger in the jungle. Do we run or do we fight to try and protect ourselves, that we have if we're being put on the spot and asked to present in a meeting? It's really unhelpful that our brain is unable to differentiate between those two threats, though. It makes life very difficult. And my favorite way of referring to this is talking about the Monday morning email or the email response you've been waiting for, and you're nervous to read. It could be an acceptance letter that you're expecting, or not acceptance letter that you're expecting from a job. It could be some feedback on a project that you did, and it's one of those things where I have to acknowledge that the email is there and think I will take a few breaths before I open that, because it's something that makes me nervous. That fight or flight stress response has been expanded in the last couple of years. And so there are now actually 6 survival reactions that we can have. So a couple more than just the fight or flight. The fight, as I said, with the tiger is confronting that threat directly, usually with anger, aggression, a bit of energy, a bit of adrenaline that kicks in to go in and protect yourself from this situation. The opposite of that is flight, escaping, running away physically or emotionally, withdrawing and avoiding that source of danger. The next one in that has been around for a little while, and that is freeze. So becoming completely stuck, still a little bit, feeling physically paralyzed by the fear of what's happening. You're in such shock by what is happening and how scary that situation is that your body is unable to respond. You are unsure whether to jump into that fight or flight mode. So instead, you just freeze, which in most instances is unhelpful, because at least a response is going to move the situation along. If you freeze, it could just end up delaying any sort of reaction or response from yourself or anybody else involved. And it doesn't resolve the problem. The next one is fawn. So fawn is, if you think about Bambi, you think about a baby fawn, and it's around attempting to please the other people, appeasing the people involved in the situation, placating the threat through total accommodation or appeasement of what is required to make sure you stay safe in that moment. F number 5 is fine. So denying or downplaying the impact of a threat by convincing yourself and trying to convince everybody else that nothing is wrong. Women are known to do this. I'm fine. When your husband says, "Are you okay? What's wrong?" I'm fine. And it can even descend into what I like to refer to as the crazy fines. And I did used to work with a lady, and when she was stressed, it wasn't just I'm fine, but the I'm fines got more intense, more aggressive, and quicker as she got more stressed. So, as you were kind of like, are you sure you're okay? Like, do you need some help? It would be, I'm fine. 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 And it would just kind of get a little bit more manic as she tried to stop us from asking if she needed help. And that fine response is one of the ways that we as women are also, if you think about the perfectionism, if you think about the people pleasing, is one of the ways that we disassociate ourselves with how we are feeling, because we have been taught that no, what you're feeling doesn't matter. You just need to make sure everybody else in the room is being looked after. And our nurturing response comes out in that, and our inability to look after ourselves and put ourselves first. And then the sixth F is faint. So losing consciousness, collapsing, an actual physical response of, that next step up from freeze. And that is also known as flop in some of the literature, where you are so overwhelmed that you literally faint or pass out as your body's way of coping with the stress of the situation. My experience with these survival reactions is that they change depending on your situation, depending on what's happening for you, where you're at in your stage of life. And there's no one set reaction that you will always have. Depending on the situation and depending on your experience with the previous threat or the previous situation you were dealing with, you may have a different response the next time around. And I realized, after having my first baby, I went very much into fight when I was pregnant. In my first trimester in particular, I went into fight. And, there was a few, someone road raged at me and things like that. And I went into fight mode because of hormones and things that were happening. But then after I'd had my baby, I actually had a peeping Tom episode in a breastfeeding cubicle in a shopping center, and I went completely into freeze at that point because I now had this small 4 or 5 month old baby that I couldn't go into fight mode. I couldn't chase this creep down the shopping center and shirt front him and give him a piece of my mind, drag him off to security or to the police station. And so that's when I realized that my response in general had shifted to threats, because I now wasn't just looking after myself. I also obviously had small baby to consider. The fact that these are reactions means that they can be very difficult for you to control in the moment. And so a lot of that work that we've talked about in episode 6 and episode 7 around the imposter syndrome reset and kind of the mindfulness and everything to work through your negative self-talk, they're going to start to help shape your reactions rather than you being able to immediately go, I feel fight reaction coming on, and so I'm going to pull that back and be reasonable. It's about understanding those reactions, because once we start to understand what our reactions are, we can then reflect on them and why those reactions come up for us, why our body responds in such a way and our mind responds in such a way to those threats. It's also good to understand those 6 reactions, because as leaders and as managers, it's our responsibility to support other people through those reactions as well. As a manager of people, if someone is being bullied, if there is a psychosocial hazard that has occurred in the workplace, you will be dealing with employees and workers that may have anyone or a combination of those 6 survival reactions. So understanding those and being able to work through them are really important. For this episode, though, I really want to focus on you. And I want to focus on you as a leader and the fears that can come up for us as leaders in the workplace. So I've broken this down into 3 specific fears. So the first one I want to talk about is the fear of failure. This is where our perfectionism comes in, and we try and make everything perfect because we are so worried and scared of what would happen if we failed. And workplaces are not supportive of failure in most cases. When we talk about failure, it's not that we've had a $1 billion blowout of a particular project in most instances. That fear of failure is a lot more close to home and a lot more personal. And that is that you said the wrong thing in a meeting, or feel like you said the wrong thing in a meeting, or that you sent an email that didn't have the correct date in the due date. And those small types of mistakes and failures, we're all human, we've all got way too much on our plate. So we can't always get things right. And it's this small buildup of these little mistakes that make us feel like a failure. The more we get worried and worked up about making small little mistakes, the more likely we are to make even bigger mistakes, because once we're stressed and we're in that reaction survival mode, or we're just starting to micromanage or rewrite the same thing over and over again, we can't see the forest through the trees, and we can't move beyond to the next part of the task or the job. And so we start making mistakes along the way. When we're over preparing, when we're double checking the work, not just of our own work, but the work of our team 5 times over, we're procrastinating on high stakes tasks, it is setting us up for failure. And then once something goes wrong, we believe that is reinforced that we are not good enough and that we were always destined to fail in this space. So we need to look at failure as growth. We are never going to get it perfect. You are never going to reach 100% on everything. Stop trying to perfect the unperfectible, and instead acknowledge the little mistakes along the way and learn from them. Practice makes progress, and by doing these things over again and tweaking and adjusting as little mistakes happen, you are learning and growing. Instead of trying to be perfect, instead look at the work that you do and the tasks that you do as tiny little experiments. When you are testing things, when you need to go and have a difficult conversation with a staff member, when you are trying something new for the first time, you're not going to know exactly what the outcome is going to be. So put on your scientist lab coat and go, okay, well, let's see what's the best way to do this. And if you start down one path and find out that is not going to work or the correct path to go down, pivot and try something different, try something new. But we're not failing. We're growing. We're continuing to learn, and we are moving forward and developing ourselves as leaders. The next fear that I want to talk about is the one that gets us stuck in our comfort zone, and that is fear of the unknown. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. We don't know what's going to happen for the rest of our career. We don't know what's going to happen if we take on that promotion. We don't know what's going to happen if we turn down that promotion. Will there never be another opportunity to take a promotion like that again? Because of how uncomfortable this fear makes us, we stay where we are. We don't like to stretch ourselves beyond that comfortable space, the comfort zone. It is called a comfort zone for a reason. We can sit, because of this, we can sit in roles for too long. We can stay content in our current status quo and refuse to push ourselves to continue learning. This does link to that fear of failure, because the question isn't just, I don't know what's going to happen. It's what if I can't deal with what happens? I don't know what's going to happen, so I can't plan. I'm a planner, I'm a perfectionist, so I can't plan how I'm going to deal with something that I don't know could happen. And we get ourselves trapped in this space where I know how I'm going to react. I know what's going to come at me, and so I'm going to stay here and be safe. Out there in the jungle, I don't know what's behind every tree. I don't know what's lurking a little bit further down the path. I don't know where the tiger is in this part of the jungle, and so I will keep myself here and I will keep myself comfortable, knowing that I can predict what's going to happen tomorrow. I can predict what's going to happen in the next meeting. I can predict the outcome of, most projects or pathways that we're going down as a team. Nothing ever stays as the status quo. Technology continues to emerge. We are in a time where AI is changing daily. We don't know how AI is going to impact our jobs in the future. There is always going to be a new person, a new boss, a new project that comes along that's different. It doesn't quite fit the culture, or is a little bit, has a different way of doing things, or requires a new set of skills. And so by sitting in that status quo and sitting in that comfort zone, you are staying put while all these unknowns are still coming at you. And because of the fear to step into that unknown, and because of the fear to step forward and face it head on, we can sink down into this really negative space. And you would have worked with people, we've all worked with people that get stuck in this, don't want anything to change. I've done my job the same way for 13 years, and so I don't want to learn the new way. I'm too old to learn it, or I don't have the ability to learn it. And those people make it very difficult for everybody else to be on the change journey, and can make it a very negative, uncomfortable workplace for everyone to be. You don't want to be the negative person that is making the workplace uncomfortable for everybody. You need to be constantly stepping out of that comfort zone and pushing yourself that little bit further. Growth does not happen inside the comfort zone. It doesn't have to be a great leap of faith into the unknown. We're just taking small steps. We're just taking the next step. We're putting our hand up for the next small opportunity. We're putting in an application for the next promotion, because there's no guarantee that you're going to get it, but you need to start preparing, and you need to start planning and practicing your interviews and practicing writing your applications so that you can take that step when you're ready. And if you do get offered a role, great. There is a step. And remember, yes, we can be scared of the unknown, but we're going to grow and step into that anyway. We can be scared of failing, but we know that it doesn't need to be perfect. We know that stepping into that failure and trying anyway is where we learn and grow. An interesting fact that I heard the other day about our brains is our brains and the amygdala are wired to keep us safe and alive and functioning as a body. Our brain is not prioritizing happiness or fulfillment or excitement. It is prioritizing that safety. When this fear comes up, remember that your brain prefers to be predictably miserable. Your brain would prefer you to settle. Your brain would prefer you to just be content. Your brain doesn't want you to step into unpredictability. Your brain doesn't want you to step into growth because that may not keep you safe. Remember how the amygdala is responding here. So the fear that comes up is your brain trying to hold you in that safe space. That does not mean your brain knows what's best for you career-wise. That does not mean that your brain knows what's best to make you happy or to make you excited or to grow you as an individual, as a professional, and stepping beyond those fears is going to strengthen your ability to step beyond the next one. Small steps lead to big changes. So don't let your brain hold you back because it is scared of the tiger that may be lurking in the jungle. The last fear that I want to talk about is a universal fear, and it is one of the oldest fears that we have as a species. And it goes back to primitive times where we were safer in a herd, in a pack. It's the same as animals sticking with their herd and sticking with their pack, because when we were living in environments where there could be a tiger lurking around the corner, where there could be a very unsafe situation lurking around the corner, it was our tribe that kept us safe. It was our pack, it was our herd, it was our group of people that knew together we needed to keep ourselves safe. We hunted together, we gathered food together, we shared food, we shared campsites, and we don't live in that world anymore. So evolutionary biology dictated that separation from the tribe meant certain death. In our modern lives, in the modern workplace, this manifests in a deep, deep ingrained fear of social or professional rejection by those around us, by the perceived tribe that we have been forced into because of the jobs that we do. So this can show up as fear of saying the wrong thing, of stepping out of line, fear of making a fool of ourselves, of speaking up in meetings. And it's all this anxiety around, am I too bossy? Am I too ambitious? Am I too loud? Am I making mistakes? Am I letting the team down? And when all of these keep coming up, it's this fear that we could get removed from this tribe. again, the dangers that we experience in the workplace are not based on needing that tribe to survive. There is very limited times within the workplace where you need to toe the line so that you don't get ostracized by your peers. Speaking up, making mistakes, taking promotions, these are things that could make other people uncomfortable. It's a little bit of potentially the tall poppy syndrome. You're too ambitious. You're making other people who aren't ambitious or who would like to be ambitious but are scared to be, you're making them uncomfortable. So those are the three fears that I see most often in the workplace. That fear of failure, which is where our perfectionism comes in. The fear of the unknown, which traps us in our comfort zones. And the fear of being kicked out by the tribe and humiliating ourselves. So we have a tendency to be quiet and go with the flow and not share our opinions or comment when we disagree. These fears then can manifest more regularly in the imposter syndrome, in negative self-talk, and can hold us in a place where we feel stuck because we cannot move beyond them. In the imposter syndrome episode 6, we did talk about the imposter syndrome reset and the 3 R's. In the negative self-talk, we talked through a couple of different ways that you can move through the different levels of negative self-talk and how to set yourself up with a bit of mindfulness so that you are able to pull yourself back out of the dark depths of those real negative spirals. Some of the things that I want you to remember as you work through these fears. Perfection is unattainable. Waiting until you feel 100% ready means that you will never feel ready. Waiting for the perfect moment to take up your opportunity means that you'll never take it. It is never going to be the perfect moment. Failure is just feedback. Put on your science lab coat and experiment. This is not who you are. You are not a failure. You are growing. Real leadership is built on making decisions, risking all of the failure, and learning from the outcome and moving forward. This fear means that you are growing. The goal is not to eliminate fear completely, but to build that internal process and that internal authority so that you can continue leading and you can continue being amazing at your job in spite of the fear. My number one recommendation and the easiest way to talk through all of this is to ask yourself, what is the worst thing that could happen? In most instances, the worst thing is not going to be a tiger attacked me. In most instances, the worst outcome is that you get a no response. I asked for a promotion, they said no. I asked for a pay rise, they said no. I asked for them to write me a referee report, they said no. It's uncomfortable. It's not ideal, but it's not a dangerous situation for you to be in. It's a starting point for further conversations in most instances. And a lot of the time, the answer is not going to be no. It's going to be something in between the ideal and the not ideal. This is the end of step 1, breaking barriers in the leadership confidence framework. So we've worked through resetting our imposter syndrome. We've worked through delving deep into where those negative thoughts come from. And we have now worked through the fear, which is really what inspires the imposter syndrome and the negative self-talk. If you want to work through these yourself, I recommend going back and starting at episode 6 with the imposter syndrome reset. This is where I start all of my clients, because imposter syndrome is a very prominent part of our experience and it is universal. So starting there is a very easy first step to make on this journey. If you want to know more about the imposter syndrome reset or would like to sit down with me and go through your reset together, head to jennifercowley.com/reset or email me at info@jennifercowley.com. Please join us next week where we will be having a look at step 2 of the leadership confidence framework, building value. This is where the fun stuff happens. So make sure you follow the podcast and don't miss the next episode. Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Leadership Confidence Podcast. Make sure you share this episode with someone who may need to hear it. You can contact me, Jennifer Cowley, at the links in your show notes or head to jennifercowley.com to learn more about how you can work with me. And remember, being you is your superpower. If you are looking for a unique suit or blazer that is comfortable, easy to wear, and confidence affirming, check out Peak Women. The blazers have an affirmation hidden in the inside, acting as your secret cheerleader as you go about your day. Plus, they have pockets you can actually use inside and out. Check out the latest collection at Peak Women. That's Peak, Peak, women.com.au and use code podcast for a special listener discount.